The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Gwilda Wiyaka's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the Science of Magic or endorsed in any manner by Gwilda Wiyaka, Relmar McConnell Media Company, its affiliated networks, stations, or employees. Welcome to the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, a program dedicated to uncovering the unified nature of reality and humanity's ever-evolving place as truly galactic beings. For more information on the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Welcome to the Science of Magic, a place where science and magic come together to transform fact into evolving truth. We can be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. This hour we'll be exploring the calling. A European boarding school education ensured that I was well versed in social graces. Yet I always dread gatherings. It's not that I can't manage them well or that I don't like people. It's the inevitable question. So, what do? You see, among many other things, I'm a shamanic practitioner, teacher, the founder and director of a state-certified occupational school of the shamanic arts. Try describing that without enduring the Spanish Inquisition. By the end of the night, I'm either firmly placed in the who's who of strange occupations category or designated as a wingnut. Usually the latter. While I'm in no way ashamed of what I do, it's laborious to describe. I've also discovered that beyond morbid fascination and wanting to pigeonhole a person, most really aren't interested in each other's jobs description or what they involve. At the same time, many do love to go on and on about their prestigious occupations, to nauseam. There's a whole lot of interrogation and boasting with no one listening. As a result, I try to be as brief and obscure as possible so as to not show up on the radar. Unfortunately, nothing seems to be more intriguing as an oblique answer in a room full of grand rhetoric. We're also identified with and judged according to our occupations that we tend to lose ourselves therein. A person's entire persona and worth is judged upon the answer to that inevitable question. It's no wonder we put so much weight on our jobs. At the same time, we assign such importance to an outside source, we've set ourselves up for dissatisfaction. Identification with anything freezes our expression, and soon we feel trapped. If we identify with our work, it can throw us into either ego or shame, depending upon the answer, whether the answer is I'm a janitor or a neurosurgeon. It's paramount to discern between our job and our calling. It's equally important to allow our calling complete mobility, depending on what's needed at any given time. My calling has me doing many jobs, yet those jobs are not my calling. One can do any job from their calling, and likewise, they can do their calling from any job. They are not one and the same. Yet we try to find our life's work in our jobs, and if our job does not adequately reflect this grand purpose, we end up hating it. This puts our lives and identity on hold until we can secure a job that's deemed worthy. So what is a calling anyway? We each came with a frequency and innate set of traits that can be engaged to further the evolution of the individual and contribute to the overall well-being of humankind. How this expresses, or if it expresses at all, is dependent upon the processing, intent, and self-identification of each individual. To find our calling, we must realize we're not what we're doing, but rather what we're being in any moment. If we identify with other than our true expression, we cannot access our calling. This results in an overall feeling of frustration and dissatisfaction that's inevitably projected onto our jobs. What do I do? Whatever the moment requires based on my intent. Who am I? Whomever I need to be within the same criteria. So, what's your calling? And who are you? Our guest this hour is Kimberly Geil, founder of Coaching Heights, a life and career coaching service designed to help her clients love their jobs or find a job they love. She has a PhD in educational psychology and research on teaching from the University of Colorado at Boulder. Her research focused on burnout and transformative professional development opportunities. Kimberly has been an administration counselor for the University of Colorado at Boulder. She received life coaching training through Mentor Coach, which has a firm foundation in positive psychology, coaching, and helping people make changes in their lives. This was a natural fit for Kim as she's passionate about doing what she loves and endeavors to help as many people as possible to do the same. I'll introduce Kimberly and her unique approach to career coaching after this short break. You're listening to The Science of Magic. Prior innovative episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Kimberly Geil, founder of Coaching Heights, a life and career coaching service designed to help you love your job or find a job you love. Find out more about Kimberly, her coaching practices and services that she offers at www.coachingheights.com. Kimberly, thank you so much for joining us on The Science of Magic.
Thank you.
Hey, let's start out with a pretty straightforward question here. So what is coaching and how is it different from psychology or counseling?
That's a good question. I love the definition of coaching as a way of effectively empowering people to find their own answers. That comes from a book called Coactive Coaching, basically the Bible of a lot of coaching certification programs. But that's really what it is. Coaching isn't about telling people what to do or giving them advice. It's helping them figure out for themselves what they need. And the International Coach Federation, or ICF, it defines coaching as partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. And they go on to say that coaches honor the client as the expert in his or her life and work, and believe every client is creative, resourceful, and whole. So that, I think, gives some clues as to how coaching can be different from therapy or counseling or hiring a consultant. Therapy often comes from a little bit more of a deficit model, that there's something that needs to be fixed. And often there is, and therapy is definitely the right call. But coaching comes from an assumption that the client has everything they need. They're creative, resourceful, and whole, and they just need a little bit of help maybe tapping into what they already possess.
I really like that because it seems like so many of our approaches come from the assumption that there's something wrong rather than just a person needs to help find their own clarity. And that's so empowering. That's a beautiful, beautiful approach to it. So let's explore the concept of a calling. How do you define a calling, Kim?
I think a calling is where you find something that really resonates with you, and it also helps with the greater good. It makes the world a better place. I know that's a cliche, but I think it's totally true. There's a great quote by Frederick Buechner. I think that's how you say his name. But it's a calling is a place where your deep gladness meets the world's deep hunger. And that really speaks to something that really makes you come alive and makes you feel vibrant and passionate, but also really meets many of the needs that the world has. So it helps make the world a better place and makes your life better at the same time.
That's really neat, too. So how do you see this as different than a life purpose?
I think there's probably a lot of overlap. It just depends on how you define it. If you are specifically talking about a calling, that implies that somebody or something is calling you to do something. And depending on your worldview, you might call that all sorts of different things. It could be God, it could be the universe, it could be destiny, it could be fate, it could be your passion, it could be society's needs. But you've kind of got those three elements. There's some sense of something from outside you, something bigger than you that's calling you to do something. And then whatever it is that you're doing to meet that calling has purpose and meaning for you, brings satisfaction to your life. And then it's other-oriented. It helps other people, get what they're looking for. It helps make the world a better place.
It sounds very interactive in a way.
Definitely, and that's actually a big part of coaching, is that it's very interactive. That book I mentioned earlier, Coactive Coaching, describes that. Basically, the client is the expert in his or her life, right? The coach isn't telling them what to do. Together, they're figuring out what the client's agenda is. What are the goals they're trying to reach? Where do they want to be? And the client is always in charge of that. So they're the ones setting where they're headed, deciding how they're going to get there, what the steps are they're going to take. The coach just helps them figure that out and stay accountable to what they've decided they're going to do.
So it's like helping them clarify their intent and then follow it?
Absolutely. That's a big part of coaching.
So do you think everyone has a calling, Kim?
Sorry, say that again?
I'm sorry. Did I step on you again? I said, do you think everyone has a calling?
I think everybody has potentially multiple callings. I think that we all have gifts and strengths and interests and values that we use to decide how we're going to live our lives. And if we're in touch with those, if we, figure out what those are and do our best to bring them into play in how we live our day-to-day lives, then we're likely to find many things that might be our calling. I mean, for me personally, I feel very drawn to coaching. I feel like it's what I'm meant to do, and I can really make a difference, positive difference in people's lives, which is really exciting for me and for my clients. And I also feel called to work at a mountain climbing school in the Tetons in the summer, where I can help people have experiences that can be life-changing.
So how do you deal with people that are kind of wrapped up in identification with something outside of themselves to where they're having trouble accessing their intent or what their calling is?
So I think that somebody would first need to recognize that that's a state in their life that they're not happy with, and it's something that they want to change. I mean, as a coach, you're not going to force somebody to go anywhere they don't want to go. That's not how it works. So assuming somebody realizes that whatever they're identifying with is preventing them from really being who they want to be, then the coach ideally would be asking powerful questions that help them tap into what that is and maybe open up newer pathways, different ways of looking at things, different ways of identifying, so that they can get to a new place.
So kind of like helping them reframe?
Yeah, that would definitely be one way of putting it.
So if I come to you and I'm kind of coming from a victim stance that I can't live my calling, I can't find my calling because my job is restricting me, my boss is restricting me, people are keeping me down, how do you start to work with that?
So I think it's important to point out that while there are often things that may feel like they're out of our control, and certainly there are some jobs that are quite restrictive, there is always at least one thing that's within our control, and that's our attitude about what's going on. So if somebody's really looking to make changes, there are actually quite a few things they can do. It's called job crafting, and you can either adjust the tasks that are a part of your job. You can focus on the relationships or the interactions that are part of your job, or you can focus on the cognitive take on your job, your perception and your attitude about what's happening.
Okay, I get it. So, like when I was going to college, one of the jobs I had to put myself through school was working at a cabinet shop, which was boring, repetitive, loud, stinky, and I can go on and on and on. I was running a table saw. So what I did is I figured out how to do the right job the same way every time, which freed my mind up to start creating things that I could build after work using the machinery. Is that the sort of thing you're talking about?
Absolutely, that's a great example. So what you did is you basically did your task in such a way that you got really good at it, and then that freed up your emotional and mental energy to be creative, which sounds like was tapping into something that brought you meaning and satisfaction.
Yes, exactly. So meaning and satisfaction is the key, not necessarily the job itself.
No, and there's some great examples. There's a couple of professors. It's actually a field that's getting a lot more attention, the idea of making your job a calling. And there's a great book by Brian Dick and Ryan Duffy called Make Your Job a Calling. And they give some great examples of, for example, you know the flaggers, people who work on the roads when they're doing construction, hold the sign that says slow while you're driving past them and stop people to let the other cars from the other direction go through?
Mm-hmm.
So most people would say that that's not the most exciting job in the world. And they have a story of somebody coming up to a flagger and saying, how do you stand it, standing here in the sun all day, just turning the sign back and forth and back and forth. And this guy said, are you kidding? I love my job. I get to keep people safe. I get to keep you safe, everybody in line behind you. I keep the people who are working on the site safe. I feel so lucky that I was led to this job. And that's a really good example of how no matter what the job is, there is always a way to make it feel meaningful and satisfying to you. Of course, for some people that's easier said than done, but it is possible. And if you go a little bit at a time, you can usually find things that make whatever it is you're doing more meaningful or more interesting or more satisfying for you.
So it's about your attitude towards it versus the job itself.
Absolutely. Any job can be a calling.
Or you can find a calling within any job, right?
Uh-huh.
I love it. I love the way you're reframing this whole thing, and the wisdom that you're bringing to this approach. So, a quick question: do we have choices on how we live our calling?
What do you mean by that?
Well, I'll probably have to take up with this on the other side of a break. But the question I'm asking is, if we have a calling, are we stuck to that calling, or do we have choices where we direct it? Is the question.
I would say definitely yes. Like I said earlier, I think you could find multiple, jobs in which to express your calling, or you might have multiple callings. They might have more emphasis at different stages in your life. Maybe one is something you do outside of work when you're working, if your work doesn't really express your calling, and maybe as you reach retirement, you really focus on that outside of work calling even more.
Got it. We're going to have to take a short break. Kimberly, this has just been really exciting. I love what you're providing for people here. And so we'll take up with this discussion on the other side of our short break. We'll return. You're listening to The Science of Magic. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Do you want to hear more? Previous broadcasts of innovative episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. Kimberly and I will return on the other side of this short break. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is the Science of Magic, a place where magic and science come together to promote enlightenment. Visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our special guest this hour is Kimberly Geil, founder of Coaching Heights, a life and career coaching service designed to help you love your job or find a job you love. You can find Kimberly at www.coachingheights.com. Kimberly, we were having fun with calling, and I'm not done with calling yet, if you're okay with that. I've observed that often we develop behaviors in our family of origin and elsewhere throughout our lives that may or may not be our true expression. So, say, for instance, having to be a caregiver because we're the oldest. It seems easy to make our coping mechanisms, or mistake our coping mechanisms for our calling. So, how can we tell true calling from our patterns, or is there a difference?
There's probably times where there is a difference and probably times where they match. But I'd say when there is a difference, it probably is important to figure that out and sort of disentangle them. It makes me think of a client I worked with who was pursuing medicine as a career, partly because that was what her family had suggested and thought she would be good at. But she really was struggling. It really didn't feel like the right fit for her. But she didn't want to disappoint her family because, she was the oldest and took care of everybody, and it fit in so many ways. So a lot of her work with me was allowing herself to really tap into what she wanted and admit to herself that medicine, although it was a very noble calling, it wasn't hers, and find a niche that was a better fit for her. And in her case, she was drawn towards social work, and then got reinvigorated and excited, and also had some conversations with her family about this and allowed them to support her for what she wanted. She was lucky because she had a family that did want her to be happy, so a lot of the things she was afraid of weren't reality, and it took sort of putting them out there in the world to see that, no, her family was going to support her no matter what she did, especially if she was making choices from an empowered place.
That's a beautiful example, because so often that's why we change college majors so many times often, isn't it? Is we think we know what we want, but when we get into it, we realize it's just not a good fit. And so have you found that people's callings can change or evolve over time?
Absolutely. I mean, we change and evolve, so I don't see why our callings wouldn't. I mean, I think some people maybe are very set and they know what they want to do from the beginning and there's no deviation. And they're lucky. I've personally been jealous of people who have that because I've been interested in lots of different things, and it's really hard to know what is the right fit. And I found a lot of things that are good fits. And I think that those have changed and evolved for me and probably will continue to. And I think that is true of a lot of people who have a lot of interests and strengths, and there's a lot of possibilities. I don't think you're ever stuck. You could always change or adjust your calling or focus somewhere else. And it's never too late.
I like that thought. So here's an interesting one. How do our callings interface with each other? Like sometimes people are drawn together by their callings. Have you seen this?
They're drawn together by their callings?
Yeah, so in other words, two people have a calling, and each carries a different part of that particular calling, and they're drawn together to work together on the calling. Have you seen that much, and how do you advise people around that?
I think that, that's something, it makes sense to me, right? If you're trying to fulfill your own calling or feel drawn to do something, you're likely going to be drawn to people who can help you fulfill that calling or maybe have gifts or strengths that you maybe don't have. And so working with them is going to allow both of you to be more effective. So to me, I think that makes great sense.
Yeah, pooling our resources kind of thing. So are there some markers of those that are living their calling and people that aren't?
Yes, actually, there's been more and more research about that, and there are actually some really great health benefits to living your calling. There's research that shows that, say, if you have meaning in your work, then your job satisfaction goes up, your career commitment, your motivation goes up, and depression and hostility go down. Other research that shows if you view your job as a calling, you're going to be more satisfied with obviously your career if that's how you're living it, but also your overall life satisfaction, and you're going to be less likely to suffer from stress and depression. There's even a meta-analysis, a study of lots of other studies, looked at about 136,000 individuals, and they found that those who felt that their lives had meaning or that they were useful to others, over all these studies, had a lower risk for heart disease and were more likely to live longer. So it's not a causation, it's just a correlation, but it gives you a sense of how there are really positive benefits to you personally and therefore society as a whole if you are able to find meaning in your work, view your job as a calling, do all these things that we know are connected to really positive mental and physical outcomes.
Listening to you reminds me of practice in most indigenous cultures is for one, it took a tribe to raise a child, but also all the members of the tribe would kind of keep their eye on that child to see where their gifts lie and encourage them that way. And if there was one member of the tribe that was well versed in that, they would kind of take it upon themselves to mentor the child until they had a chance to really develop their own style, but still within being honored for what they were bringing. So as a life and career coach, how do you help a person find their calling and blend their job and life with it?
So ideally, it's approaching them with no agenda of my own and no attachment to where they go. They need to be free to figure out for themselves what that is. And my job is to ask powerful questions. So those are open-ended questions that I don't know the answer to. Probably the client doesn't know the answer to them either, but with that space, they may come closer to finding that answer. So not yes or no questions, but things that really open up that space to tap into what they already know, or maybe, things they think they want to do but aren't doing, and figuring out what's holding them back, what the fears are that are holding them back.
That really sounds fun. Let's play with it a little bit. So, say I've come to you and I say, what I'm doing, I'm just not satisfied with it. I'm bored with it, but I don't know where to go. So, what would a question be? How would you dance with that?
I might ask you, well, let's say that you could snap your fingers and have your ideal job situation. What would it be?
And then I would go, well, I really hate commuting.
That makes sense. And we might talk about, is there someplace else you could work that would minimize your commute? Or if you have to have a commute, is there a way that you can make your commute more worthwhile? Are there things you could do on your commute that would add meaning to your life?
Oh, so then I might come up with something like, well, I could listen to a book on tape on things I'm interested in or things that might make me better at my job.
Absolutely. And how would that feel?
I'm liking this. This is fun. Well, that'd feel good. Then I wouldn't just be sitting there in the car telling myself how much I hate the commute and traffic. And I would also be bettering myself.
And then I might ask you if that's something that you want to commit to doing. So is that something you want to commit to doing?
Okay, so there you go. So now what you're doing is you're having me find a solution and then holding me accountable to it, right?
Exactly. And the idea is it's a solution that you've come up with. So again, I'm not telling you what it is. I'm not the expert. You're the expert. You know what's going to work for you or not. And most of us don't want to be told what to do. We want to figure things out for ourselves. I was just working with another client who is trying to figure out some big life decisions, and she'll talk to her friends who, of course, love her and want to be supportive, but they immediately tell her what she should do. And she was saying how refreshing it was to get to talk to me as a coach and have somebody just listen and not be attached to what she does, not tell her what to do. So she can just start figuring out what really does matter to her and make that decision.
So what you're doing is you're holding space for them to find their own answers, and when they get bogged down, kind of coaching them in a direction where they can find their own answers. That's a beautiful approach, and I really want to explore some more of it, but we will have to take another break. We'll be back on the flip side of this short break. You're listening to The Science of Magic, the place where all our altruistic professionals of science and the esoteric create common ground for the betterment of our world. Kimberly and I will be back on the other side of this break. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, bringing together gifted people of service to our world. Our website is www.thescienceofmagic.net, and I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Kimberly Geil, founder of Coaching Heights, a life and career coaching service designed to help you love your job or find a job you love. You can contact Kimberly at www.coachingheights.com. Kimberly, now I understand that you don't have to be present in the person's life in order to do the coaching. You do this long distance, is that correct?
That's correct. Do it all over the phone.
Do you do any Skype?
And I think that I haven't done Skype yet, but it's certainly a possibility. I think there are actually some advantages to just hearing somebody's voice, because then you're not distracted by the visual cues and the physical cues. You can really just focus on what people are saying, as well as how they're saying it, their tone of voice, what is unsaid. You can actually learn a lot from that. And so for me personally, I find it works really well to do coaching over the phone.
It does help a person stay focused. I know in my private sessions over the phone, it's like we just get down to business. It takes less time, and yet the warmth and the camaraderie can still be there. So, there's something a little bit esoteric about thinking of life coaching as it applies to a person's life calling. Where do you see this calling is coming from?
Well, I think it depends on the person, and there's certainly argument in the research about where it comes from. sort of the modern version of a calling is that it just comes internally, right? It's something that you are drawn to. It's your passion, and it's about finding something that brings you satisfaction. And that's sort of contrasted with the more traditional version of a calling, which is that it comes from outside. And for a lot of people, that's a spiritual calling. I'm personally, I guess I consider myself spiritual in that I believe there's something more than us out there. So it could be the universe or destiny, but some idea that there's something outside of you calling you to do something.
That's a beautiful way of looking at it. So, what makes somebody a good coach?
So I think a good coach, ideally, like I said before, isn't coming with any judgment. They're not attached to the outcome. They don't have an agenda for you as their client. So they're really opening that space for you to go where you need to go. And they are, like I said, asking powerful questions, those questions that open up space. It's actually a lot harder to ask powerful questions than you would think. It's very easy to ask questions that seem like they're open-ended questions, but they're really leading questions. You know, there's really a right answer that you're expecting somebody to give. So as a coach, you really have to be paying attention to how you're asking questions. Make sure you're not putting any of your ideas or what you might do in that situation, because it's not about you. You're not them. It's about them. They're the ones that need to do what they need to do and figure out what that is. And I also think a good coach is going to be open to listening to their own intuition, sharing metaphors or ideas that come to them, no matter how crazy they might be. I was talking with a client once about finding a relationship, actually, which was what she was working on at that time. And for some reason, chocolate soufflés popped into my head, and we did this little exercise about baking the right person into a chocolate soufflé, which I know sounds ridiculous, but it really resonated with her. And at the end, she said that chocolate soufflés were her favorite dessert. So just being open to that sort of thing, I think, helps you serve the client even better.
So when you're sitting there working with someone, you're really being open on all levels, even to the point that your intuition can take in the exact thing they need to hear, it sounds like. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think sometimes it can. I mean, you're not going to get to that state all the time, but ideally as a coach, that would be a state that you're striving for, to really open that space to whatever the client needs and help them find it, no matter how that comes to you.
So it's really an exercise in stepping out of yourself, isn't it?
Yes, and it's definitely challenging because it's hard to set aside yourself and your ideas and values and judgments. But I don't think you can be a good coach unless you can exercise the discipline to do that. Otherwise, it's too easy to fall into that habit of kind of telling people, even if it's subtle, what to do, or kind of trying to direct where they go.
And can't that sometimes come from a feeling of responsibility for outcome?
Yes, but ultimately, that person is always responsible. Just like you're the only one ultimately responsible for your own, I believe. And as a coach, you might fall into that now and again, and that's okay. We're all human. Nobody's perfect all the time. You just have to acknowledge that with your client and bring that out and move on.
So how do people get a hold of you to enlist your services?
They can go to my website, which is www.coachingheights.com, and there's a contact form if they want to send an email, or if they want to call me, there's a phone number there. And I'm happy to talk to people about whatever is going on and see where they need to go and if I might be able to help them get there. I think it's important to me that I work with people who feel that it's a good fit. There are lots of people out there who can help you get where you want to go, and a lot of them might be great fits and some not so great fits. So you want to make sure that you're working with somebody who is really somebody that you trust, you feel that you can create the kind of relationship that will allow you to get where you need to go.
So why would someone need a coach, and what kind of results might they expect?
Well, there's all kinds of reasons why people might want to work with a coach. I mean, a coach could help with weight loss, with getting more exercise, with finding romantic partners, with being more efficient, reducing clutter, starting a business, managing your time better, setting goals, finding a job, loving your job, all those sorts of things. And ideally, if you are working with a coach, you're working with a coach because you want to get into action. I know for me, when I work with a coach, and I have several times, I move from thinking about things, basically daydreaming about things, to actually doing them. So it can be a way to really start moving towards where you want to be instead of just thinking about where you want to be. There's a big difference.
So like if I, like when our little exercise, I stated to you, oh, I could do such and such, your next answer was, yes, but will you? So that's kind of like a call to action, isn't it? So I've kind of committed myself to myself through you.
Right. A good coaching session would have some goal, some step at the end, some sort of action step that you as the client have come up with, and then you've decided what you're willing to do or not, and made a commitment to your coach, and also let them know how you're going to report back to them. Maybe you'll text them when you've done whatever it was, or you'll, email them the next week and let them know, yes, I did it or I didn't. And then you move on from there.
That's beautiful. So the coaching goes on beyond the coaching session in that we've made an agreement and then there's kind of a follow-up. It sounds very unfolding. Kimberly, I can't thank you enough for this beautiful work that you're bringing to the world, your willingness to perform it for people, and your gorgeous, open-hearted approach to it. I hope that you have a wonderful clientele because they're certainly going to, benefit from your level of processing and level of heart. So thank you so much for being with us on our show. This is The Science of Magic. Our guest was Kimberly Geil, founder of Coaching Heights, a life and career coaching service designed to help you love your job or find a job you love. This has been The Science of Magic. Remember, you can always listen to past thought-provoking episodes on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. Until next time, dear ones, may you be blessed with knowledge, comforted with love, and joyfully live your calling.
One people, one nation.